cloud. Okay, so it should be recording now.
Okay.
All right, everyone, sorry. It's all stuff we've already gone through with other classes and the technology issues. I wasn't here on Monday, but I know that Dr. Garrison gave you a talk on Monday. So today we have another guest speaker, Dr. Melissa Nivens, who's over in Pennsylvania College of Humanities and Social Sciences. So I'll let her have as much time as possible. So.
Good morning, everybody. As she said, I'm Dr. Melissa Nivens. I'm an English professor. I work in composition and rhetoric studies. I'm also the writing program administrator. So a lot of the work I do deals with writing curriculum and what happens in the first year writing courses and the writing proficiency exam. I also work in feminist rhetoric. And so that's a little bit about what I'm going to talk about today. As she said, I'm in the Prothro-Jaeger College of Humanities and Social Sciences, and these are the departments that are in our college. And I'm, as I said, part of the English, Humanities, and Philosophy department. I know that you all are talking about different types of research in this class, and you're learning about different research methods. And so I'm imagining that this maybe is a little bit of a review for you, but understanding that there are different types. Folks that are in the College of Math and Science, for example, they're going to be working more in this quantitative type of research. They're going to be looking at, making a hypothesis, doing experiments, doing studies, where these results can be measured in numbers and statistics. They're looking for very accurate types of results, something that is measurable. In my college and in my discipline, we don't do quantitative research very often. Maybe in linguistics or something like that, but we don't really work in the world of numbers and statistics. Instead, we are doing qualitative research for the most part. This means that we are using methods that are not quite as exact. We are not looking for an answer or a number. We are looking for meaning. We are looking for reasons, opinions, motivations for why folks do what they do or write what they write. So you'll see a little bit of that today in the study that I'm going to share. I'm just circling what we do there. So in the world of feminist rhetoric, one of the foundational texts that we use is Royster and Kirsch's Feminist Rhetorical Practices. These women write about the kinds of research practices we do in this field. And on their very first page of this book, they say, we have found that stories matter. It matters in what stories get told and what stories are shared as part of history. So I'm just going to read from my notes a little bit here. I say, as an English professor, I'm interested in composition and rhetoric studies, especially in how writing relates to women. A foundational text for me and many other scholars is in feminist rhetoric is Royster and Kirsch's 2012 book. On the very first page, the authors tell us that though they work through their work, they have found that stories matter, and who tells a better story than a country music singer? So you might think of country music as fairly conservative and not necessarily a place for activism, right? But I want to give you a definition of country music real quick, and then jump into our study of some female country music singers and songwriters. This is a definition just straight from dictionary.com. For this particular presentation, I use a mix of academic sources like Royster and Kirsch and more popular sources like dictionary.com. You're going to see a slide from Rolling Stone. So I use a mix of both popular and academic sources for a study like this. So the definition here, a style and genre of largely string-accompanied American popular music, having roots in the folk music of the Southeast and cowboy music of the West, usually vocalized, generally simple in form and harmony, and typified by romantic or melancholy ballads accompanied by acoustic or electric guitar, banjo, violin, or harmonica. So as I said, we can likely agree that country music is often rooted in these conservative values and traditional views. However, country music is really kind of having a moment right now. Well, it was before the pandemic. Before that, stopped all performances and entertainment venue, things like that. But they were having a moment. In September of 2019, just a year ago, Ken Burns released a PBS documentary, a docu-series actually, it was more than one episode, that examined the history of country music and a decidedly American art form. And I'm going to show you if my link will work, I'm going to show you the trailer to that documentary real quick. I'm so lonesome I could cry.
Country music comes from right in here. This heart and soul that we all have.
You can dance to it, you can make love to it, you can play it at a funeral. It has something in it for everybody.
Country music is about human emotions. We're always looking for those topics that are going to tell us a lot about who we are, not just to the era that we covered, but who we are now.
If you want to look for like super strong women telling really amazing stories, you went to country.
I mean, the songs are just live. It's I've seen it or I've lived it. And I never would tell my husband which one was.
I believe that you can go look and find a country song that will help you feel better. Sometimes it might make you cry, but you'll feel better.
This is the story of a uniquely American art form that sometimes gets defined as 3/4 of the truth. And the people who made it, created it, and how it became a business.
Hello, Rosanna Cash.
My dad, he worked out all of his problems on stage. That's where he took his anguish and fears and griefs, and he worked them out with an audience. That's just who he was.
I hope that when people hear of this series, that they'll tune in. It made a convert out of me. It's a wonderful story.
Crazy, I'm crazy.
I always thought it was a really good song, and I played it for Patsy Cline, and she thought it was a great song.
It's phenomenally great music about people who felt their stories weren't being told. I think that's utterly American.
I could cry.
All right, so you heard from some of the superstars of country music there in that little trailer, and you saw Loretta Lynn. She's who I'm going to primarily focus on today. She's on my T-shirt here, and so we're going to talk mostly about her. I do want to give you a little bit more history about country music, just the beginnings. This little timeline here illustrates not only country music but also the introduction of women into this genre. Country music is something that is decidedly American, and it is fairly new. Only about 100 years old. This timeline tells us that the first country radio station was in 1922. By 1927 is when this radio program, the Weekly Barn Dance, became the Grand Ole Opry that we know of today. By the 40s, Minnie Pearl, the famous, she would wear the hat with the tag still on it, the howdy, 1940. Kitty Wells, the first woman to hit #1 on the charts by 1952. Patsy Cline, you heard, her music in the trailer. Also in the 50s, 1957. And then by 1965, Loretta Lynn records You Ain't Woman Enough to Take My Man, and it reaches #1. So we're going to be hanging out in the 60s and 70s as we talk about Loretta Lynn. All right, so here she is, and just a little bit about her as a person, just her bio a little bit. She was born in Kentucky, and I have 1930 question mark there because when I went to look for her bio and a little bit about her early life, the Wikipedia and Rolling Stone magazine both say that Loretta Lynn was born in 1932, but History.com says she was born in 1935. So I'm not really sure. In her autobiography, Coal Miner's Daughter, the book that she writes about her own life, and she has a song of the same name. She famously claims that she was married at, quote, not quite 14 and had 4 babies by the time she was 18. So either 1935 is right, or she was closer to 16 when she got married, if 1932 is right. Either way, she was just a kid herself when she and her husband Doolittle married in 1948. So she was a young woman, had lots of babies really quick. Her husband bought her a guitar as a gift, and she taught herself to play. By 1960, she was singing and playing with a band, and she had her first single, "I'm a Honky Tonk Girl." It's an older movie, but I encourage you, to watch Coal Miner's Daughter and the movie, and you can kind of learn a little bit about her. But as I said, through this presentation, I'm going to, look at her lyrics specifically, and how even though her humble upbringing in Kentucky and this early marriage and this life as a mother and wife at such a young age, which seems so traditional in a sense, she actually disrupts these conservative ideas through her music later, as she talks about some things that were maybe taboo in her lyrics. And the activism that she does through her music paves the way for women songwriters and performers that come after her. And we'll take a look at that as well. So this is a quote from the book, Coal Miner's Daughter. She says, "When I first came to Nashville, people called us hillbilly singers and hardly gave country music any respect. We lived in an old car, in dirty hotels, and ate when we could." This is depicted in the movie Coal Miner's Daughter, when she and her husband head to Nashville, and they are actually driving from radio station to radio station, peddling her songs, trying to get someone to play them on the radio. And they're eating, bologna sandwiches in the back of the car and sleeping in the car. She talks about that, or it's portrayed in the movie, when she finally makes her way to Grand Ole Opry. The watching it and seeing her determination is really, astonishing. Still, as she grew to superstardom, her voice and perspective became bolder, both within her marriage and on the stage. By the 1970s, her songs began to take a stand regarding women's issues. Again, a year or so ago, Rolling Stone actually looked at Loretta Lynn's lyrics and identified 13 of her gutsiest lyrics. And we'll take a look at some of those. Many of Loretta Lynn's songs express feminine strength and determination, and a sense that women would no longer simply stand by their man, as Patsy Cline had told us to do, as some other singers likely suggest they should. Her perceptive business sense and talent for self-promotion also demonstrated that women could thrive in the competitive music industry. In 1967, the Country Music Association recognized the new importance of women singers by giving Lynn its first ever award for Female Vocalist of the Year. We just had the Country Music Awards, the CMAs, this month. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. So here's the first set of lyrics I'd like to look at. This song is called Rated X. Rated X didn't make Rolling Stone's list of famous or gutsy lyrics, but it's still pretty gutsy nonetheless. It was recorded in 1972. It became her 6th #1 single. Rated X is about the stigma of divorced women. What is especially problematic is that single women of Loretta's era should be thought of as virginal, right? They're supposed to be some kind of perfect, pure type of woman. A divorced woman doesn't have that same image. They obviously aren't virginal and pure. So where do they fit in? She chooses to speak directly to the divorced woman by using the second person you, and she points out that you'll be talked about and maybe even pursued by your husband's friends. Your friend's husband. Overall, she speaks frankly to her audience about a taboo subject. In the 60s, divorce was not as commonplace as it is today. So I want you to take a look at her lyrics. This is the kind of thing we do in the world of English and humanities, is whether we're looking at a novel or whether we're looking at a poem or song lyrics, we're taking time to analyze and look deeper for deeper meaning and what might be the message that the piece of art is portraying. So here's a little bit of that song. I've identified some things in blue to kind of show you what I thought might be the most gutsy, so to speak. She says, divorce is the key to being loose and free. You're going to be talked about. Everybody knows that you've loved once. They think you'll love again. There's that idea of not being virginal or pure. They maybe look at you as easy, perhaps, because you've already been married. But they sure know nobody knows where you're going, but they know where you've been. And they're thinking of your experience of love. Their minds eat up with sin. The women all look at you like you're bad, and the men all hope you are. But if you go too far, you're going to wear the scar of a woman rated X. So then there's that cautionary tale at the end. You still got to watch it. You still got to behave like a lady, so to speak. Here's another one. This is a song called "Hey Loretta." You remember in the little trailer, she says, "I either lived it." That the things that show up in her songs are the things that she lived, or she saw it. So this one is on Rolling Stone's list. She says, "Well, goodbye tubs and clotheslines, goodbye pots and pans. I'm going to take the Greyhound bus as far as I can. I ain't going to wash no windows. I ain't going to scrub no floors. I work my fingers to the bone and we don't hardly speak. And all I ever get is just a little kiss about once a week. So you can feed the chickens and you can milk the cow. This woman's liberation, honey, is going to start right now." So she's speaking directly to those expected gender roles. That she's supposed to be the one, doing the laundry, cooking the meals, cleaning the house, taking care of the kids. And she says, "You know what? You can do it. I'm leaving. I'm starting Women's Lib right now. You can handle all that stuff. I don't get anything in return for all the stuff I do for you." Her message is pretty clear there, that the roles of women in the 1970s are changing, that women are going to work, and women are not sticking to those prescribed roles that were once expected of them. As I told you before, I tried to use a mix of academic research and popular sources. This comes from a more academic article. In her article, "Recycled Trash, Gender and Authenticity in Country Music," Pamela Fox explores Loretta Lynn's autobiography, "Coal Miner's Daughter," which I had quoted from earlier, along with other notable female country stars' stories. Fox points out that country ideology equated femininity squarely within the domestic sphere, the cleaning the house, the cooking the meals, especially motherhood, the single mode of gender authenticity available to poor Southern white women. There wasn't anything else. There was no other alternative besides being a wife and a mother. And Loretta was a wife and a mother. She tells us, by the age of 14. So there was no other option for her. While Loretta does sing about motherhood and domestic life, she seems to turn it on its head as she approaches subjects like divorce that we saw in the first song, the dissatisfaction of housewives that we saw in the second song, and eventually the freedom of birth control. Scandalous. That's going to be our next song. She sing. This one is called "One's on the Way," which means what you think it means. Again, if you watch Coal Miner's Daughter and at age 14 or perhaps 16, the wedding night scene is quite telling of her innocence and naivety. Loretta was truly just a child and completely unprepared for what her new husband desired from her. As a girl, she had no choice but to equate sex with pregnancy. She was one of 8 children herself, and her 4 babies, as we know, came very quickly in the first 4 years of her marriage. But that was in the 40s and 50s. Now we're in the 60s and 70s. By the 70s, Loretta could see that the advent of contraception really did change the possibilities for women. In 1971, she recorded this song, "One's on the Way," which illustrates what happens when women don't have access to birth control. Additionally, she astutely recognizes the disconnect between social classes regarding access and opportunity, perhaps because by this time, she's been a part of both worlds and sees the stark contrast. Again, she's speaking directly to everyday women and offering compassion for their struggles. She sees what's happening in the big cities, the women marching for women's lib, and what's being printed in Better Homes and Gardens, and these ideas of women's lib, and this is where we're headed. But I know what it's like living in the Midwest or in the South and being poor. And so she talks about the pill may change the world tomorrow, but meanwhile today, here in Topeka, the flies are still buzzing, the dogs are barking, the floors need scrubbing, one needs a spanking and one needs a hugging, and Lord, one is on the way. So maybe there's some progress happening in the big cities with these more fancy women, but here, this is what we're still dealing with, stuck in these prescribed roles. Then her song, "The Pill." She says, "I promised if I'd be your wife, you showed me the world, but all I've seen of this old world is a bed and a doctor bill. I'm tearing down your brooder house because now I've got the pill. All these years I've stayed at home while you've had all your fun, and every year's gone by, another baby's come. There are going to be some changes made right here on Nursery Hill. You've set this chicken your last time." So again, she is speaking about equating sex with pregnancy and a baby coming every year. And she says, now with the pill, that's not happening anymore. This section of the song shows the real power shift that the pill brought women. The speaker's telling her husband, "I'm ready to make a deal with you. You can't turn down." Now sex can occur under her terms. And she even alludes to the fact that she might actually enjoy it more freely now without the burden of always getting pregnant and always having another baby, always having this consequence. Here's a little bit more. "I'm ready to make a deal. The incubator is overused because you've kept it filled. The feeling comes easy now." There's those references. Perhaps Loretta feels even a twinge of envy, because her time has already passed. Her children are growing up now. She has maybe a twinge of jealousy for young women of the 70s versus her as a young woman of the 50s. She says, "It's like that hit record I had in 1975, The Pill, about this woman who's taking birth control pills so she won't have no more babies. Well, they didn't have none of them when I was younger, or I'd have been swallowing them like popcorn. See, the men who run some of the radio stations, they banned that record because they didn't like what I was saying. But women knew. Like I say, I know what it's like to be pregnant and nervous and poor." Here she notes the tension that the song created. She knew it was edgy, but she was using the moment, that historical moment of the women's movement, to talk about social issues in her music. She perhaps found, some found it indecent for her to talk about something so edgy, but it was something that women needed to hear. Even though she was met with criticism, Loretta Lynn still used her music to add to the important conversations surrounding women's issues. Perhaps embedding these sometimes controversial issues within catchy melodies helped make them more palatable to audiences that were reluctant to change. If you could sing about it on the radio, then maybe it wouldn't be so taboo or edgy anymore. It could be something that could be out in the open. And it led the way for other women who came after her. Certainly there have been, other notable women besides Loretta Lynn who've used their lyrics for activism and progress. We see Dolly Parton, Reba McEntire, Shania Twain, the now known as the Chicks rather than Dixie Chicks. Artists like Loretta Lynn made space for activism in this genre. There's a scarcity of women on country radio. In 2000, spins by male artists outstripped women 2-1. By 2018, that gap had widened to 9-1. If you were to listen to a country radio station, you're definitely going to hear male singers a lot more often than you're going to hear women. However, we can ask, where are the women in country music today? Until just this month, a woman hadn't won the CMA's Entertainer of the Year since 2011. That 2011 winner was Taylor Swift, who's not even really in the country genre anymore. In fact, since 2011, only 2 women have even been nominated for Entertainer of the Year in the last 5 years. That was Carrie Underwood and Miranda Lambert. Just a couple of weeks ago, just within this month, at the CMAs, Carrie Underwood won, but she has to share it with Thomas Rhett. It was a tie. Maybe you saw that it was somehow a tie. She did not win it outright. So here we are. It is a new era. We're living in 2020. It is a new era of country music and women in country music right now. They are taking a page from Loretta Lynn by using their music to bring attention to modern women and their daily realities. The High Women, some of my favorites, made up of Maren Morris, Natalie Hemby, Brandi Carlile, and Amanda Shires, is working to build women up within the music industry instead of tearing them down or working to be competitive against one another. Instead of feeding that culture of competition, they share the writing credits and lead vocals as they sing about women's triumphs and challenges. They are upfront with their frustrations. They sing about the added pressures of womanhood and femininity in their song Redesigning Women. The relentlessness of parenting in their song My Name Can't Be Mama, and the male gaze in lesbian relationships, If She Ever Leaves Me. Again, Loretta sang about divorce and birth control. The High Women are singing about same-sex relationships. So using their voices for activism and taking on those sometimes controversial subjects. And here's some of the lyrics from those 2 songs. My favorite line from High Women, from Redesigning Women, we're running the world while we're cleaning up the kitchen. So we're still in that domestic sphere, but we are working outside the home too. And then there's the lyrics from If She Ever Leaves Me. You can see, I've loved her in secret. The sky hasn't always been blue. She's talking to a man here, though, saying, if she ever leaves me, it won't be for you. Partly because of the gutsy singers like Loretta Lynn, divorce and birth control pill are no longer controversial topics. She helped open up the tough conversations through music. It seems that female country artists today are following her lead and continuing to use music as a space for feminist activism. And I'll leave you with a photograph from the Grammys last winter, spring, right before COVID. The Grammys were held, and so this is a stage full of female country artists, as I said at the beginning, who are having a bit of a moment right now. All right. Do you have questions about the subject matter or about my research project, or anything that you want to talk about? Sure.
So you noted that she got married before she was 14.
Mm-hmm.
14. She had 4 children.
Mm-hmm.
But she started her career like almost immediately after that, 1940s, 1950s.
Mm-hmm.
So she explained that she was traveling with her husband,
Mm-hmm.
living in dirty hotels, eating bologna sandwiches or whatnot.
Where are the kids?
Yeah. Did she bring them with her?
She does not. My references are from Coal Miner's Daughter, her biography, and her in the movie. And she does. They are not really small when they leave out on to start her career. They are a little bit older, but she does leave them back with her parents, I believe. Yes.
So I wonder if, have you ever looked into the potential difference in earnings for male and female country artists and looking at, like, for example, with touring or with albums? Because if you look at those plays versus it's got worse. Right?
Yes, it has.
It's got worse. So
Mm-hmm.
have you ever looked into that? Because it seems like that'd be an interesting question to ask about.
I have not, but yes, I do think that would be, very interesting to look at. I originally presented this at a conference last spring, but I did not look at earnings, but I think that would have even added to the inequality, within the industry.
Are there any other reasons why you believe that there is such inequality in terms of the numbers of women? The shift in the numbers of women from 20 years ago in country music to right now?
I think that when you read about what other country artists are saying, they talk about the competitiveness among women, that it was not a friendly atmosphere among women artists, and it made it even more difficult. And these new artists, like the High Women, are working to change that where we're not. That it was so limited that they were competing with each other, instead of when one of us rises, we all rise, So I think the perspective has changed. Instead of me fighting you for that airplay or that concert or that whatever, that #1 spot, recognizing that when one woman succeeds, we all succeed. And so I think that change of perspective adds to what's happening now. With seeing all those women on stage together here, instead of one trying to outdo the other.
Do you guys have other questions for our speaker? Or in general about her discipline and how she's decided on this question in terms of the discipline for her?
I can tell you that, like early in my, graduate work and things like that, I was really just focused on, the teaching of writing. I was researching things like, incidences of plagiarism or, how to teach writing. And I still am interested in those. But while I was working on my PhD, I was really opened up to this whole area of feminist rhetoric and being able to look at women's voices, especially, and what happens with women's writing. And I saw you can do this with an English degree. I didn't know that that was a whole area. And so my studies first began with this idea of women within the domestic sphere, those who went to college to get a degree in home economics, where they are learning in college how to keep a home or how to teach others how to keep a home. That was fascinating to me. And how that field opened other doors into like chemistry and math and science, because they were able to, the chemistry of cooking foods, it was like a back door into the sciences. Also with that work, I spent a lot of time in the archives looking at historical documents and what's left behind and what's kept and what's not kept and how that shapes the story that gets told. And so that's, kind of my foundation with, exploring the stories of women. Then a couple of years ago, I worked really closely with another professor in our department named Dr. Giddings. He's a huge Bruce Springsteen fan. And he said, let's look at some of Bruce's lyrics. And I'll read, from a masculinity's point of view, and you read from a feminist point of view. And so that opened another area of research for us to look at music, American music, and how it contributes to culture and how it reflects culture. And so that was really kind of where this topic came from, was we had been looking in music, and I thought, well, what about these women singers? What's happening over here? And so then that led me to this study. Things are kind of serendipitous, how they work like that. Yes?
So I guess I'm curious about that competitive,
Mm-hmm.
this definition, because it seems to feed into a lot of perceptions about women being competitive, that it's,
Sure.
it's their own failure that they're not all succeeding. It sort of feeds into like a cattiness type of thing.
Yes.
And so I'm wondering about that sort of part of the rhetoric. And then the other is there are also some places where you see what's it, the Smurfette idea that there's only one woman
Yes.
ever
Yes.
in a particular community of,
Mhm.
of something.
Mhm.
So do you think either of those is maybe applicable here too?
I do. That Smurfette that you use, I think about, like movies and Westerns especially. You think about Lonesome Dove, you think about Tombstone, there's just one woman. Everybody's fighting for the one woman. That's certainly a phenomenon, and that would certainly contribute to that. There's only room for so many. And I think that change, this kind of perspective is a changing philosophy among, women of our generation, perhaps, saying, there is room at the table for more of us. It isn't just, because at a time when women's movement was happening, it was just kind of like there was only the one space, we'll hire one woman. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, if you've watched her movie recently about, after her death, if you've watched her movie On the Basis of Sex, she is in her Harvard law class of like 500, and there's only like 9 women, and she's pointedly asked, why should you be here taking up a space for a man? She's asked that specifically. And so there's only room for so many women, so it would naturally be competitive. But as doors begin to open, there is this, hopefully more and more change of, being able to lean in and say that there is room for more of us at the table. Sure.
Yeah, just something I was thinking about when we're raising these issues. Most of the female performers you're talking about are primarily front people with their bands or solo men, recording through probably engineers and things of that nature. And what I wondered if there's less females being played, is there also, are we seeing growth of maybe all female bands? We saw this with rock and roll and the 80s. It's kind of once you have the full female bands and you have the credit and it goes other people. Are we seeing a similar thing in the country, or is it going back the other way? Are there more performers?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know enough about, the ins and outs of the industry to really answer that, but just like a basic observation, it does seem that a little bit. And when we think, historic, like if you look at like the Dixie Chicks, they were out of the public eye for so long because, they in the early 2000s, they were the #1, female group, and, were everywhere, and they spoke out politically, and they were gone. Their music was banned from the radio. You did not hear them, and they, stayed under the surface until it was safe to come out again, almost, right? So now they are back at the forefront and continuing to, speak out politically. Yes.
Going back to that statistic that you raised about the amount of amount of songs from 2000 to 2018 on the charts from female country artists. What do you think would cause such a big change going from the ratio of 2 to 1 to 9.7 to 1? Like, do you think it's the country consumers, or is it like less songs being released by female artists? Or what do you think?
I'm not sure about the exact answer of that. I do know that there has been an explosion of this like bro country music at the same time. I'm talking like Florida Georgia Line and Blake Shelton and Luke Bryan, this real bro idea of music. And so there's a lot of men that are out there in the, in the industry. And so that could be part of it, and not so much less women, just more men. But I don't have the exact statistics about that, but just an observation.
So what do you think is different in like the country industry versus like you see in other?
I don't know if it is different. I don't know. I don't know if what the statistics are like in pop. If it's more male singers in pop or if it's more women.
Yeah, I was about to say, because like in pop and rap, you see people like Cardi B.
Right, sure.
In other genres, you see women making strides. So I was just wondering, like, what would cause something in country music to make it go the opposite direction?
Yeah, and this is 2018. I wonder what, if anything's changed between 2018 and 2020. Has there been a move again, in the other direction? But yeah, you're right. In pop, we're hearing Cardi B, we're hearing Lizzo. I mean, there are lots of women's voices out there also.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Nivens.
Thank you very much for having me. I enjoyed it.
Just a couple things really quickly before you guys all go. The first is that this PowerPoint, so let me actually stop the recording real quick. I almost want to know who all the women are too.
I know you want to look.
I know.
We can see Carrie's legs here. So
Yeah, she's she's obvious in it.